Thank you very much to all the artists and curators coming here tonight. Thank you for finding the way here, and thank you to all the partners of Berliner Korrespondenzen, Esra Küçük of the Allianz Kulturstiftung, and Ralf Bester of the Foreign Ministry. A warm welcome to you. He's in charge of culture and communication there and will address you shortly. And thank you to the audience here in the hall and in the live stream, because without you, your interest, your eagerness to learn, to watch, to listen, to question, in short, your interest in thinking, we would not be here. Tonight is entitled Art and Protest. Let me say a few words on that. In a free society, everyone is allowed to protest everything else. When I say that, you know exactly that in society as free as that does not exist. But there are very different degrees of freedom and different forms of protest. Sometimes it is a long road from protest to resistance. Sometimes protest is resistance already. The point is to question social conditions here or there, or very basically, and to change that. Here too, art can help. A few meters away from here in the Pergamon Museum, Aesthetics of Resistance by Peter Weiss, the great novel, starts. When you follow that, you can land in jail nearly everywhere in the world. In Russia at the moment, it's enough to call a war a war. There and in many other states the world over, one negative word is enough to set the ruler on you. In Ukraine, resistance against the Russian invasion means something else than resistance against the conditions in Cuba. We are here tonight because we want to learn about the experience of the others. We know that protest is not the same as protest. It's not just because you get a day off school in one place and off tortured somewhere else. Are we against the war, or are we in favor of weapons for Ukraine? I don't know. But this is precisely what we want to discuss, not just in talk shows on TV, but also around the kitchen tables. Putin confronts us with our fears that the Earth could be destroyed much earlier than the climatologists have predicted. But only in journalism you chase up different stories every day. In reality, catastrophes are piled on top of one another. New ones do not make the previous one superfluous. It's all adding up. Art tries to show what is there and what could be there. We live in a forever changing complexity and are confronted with continuity and persistence all the time. Russia attacks Ukraine just as Russia and the Soviet Union attacked its neighbors in previous centuries, sometimes together with Germany, as was the case in 1938 when attacking Poland, sometimes in collusion with others. In 1812 and 1945 showed that Russia was our salvation. In 1815 and in 1949, a few years later, it was completely different from a German and a European perspective. Let us not forget the more than 20 million Soviet people who lost their lives in the Second World War, for which we were responsible. Nationalism, racism, and sexism are mixed together on both sides of the border, and they form a muddle that's difficult to resolve. Art is looking for the thread of Ariadne in the maze of human life. The participants in the Berliner Korrespondenzen all have their own experience with the aesthetics of resistance. They are artists and activists in one person, each of them in their own way. with their own experiences and their own forms of expressing it. TANIA BRUGUERA from Cuba is an activist and at the same time one of the best-known protagonists of the international arts scene. Her works were shown, among others, at the Documenta, the Vienna Biennale, the Centre Pompidou, and the Tate Modern. OLGA SHPARAGA is a philosopher and activist from Belarus. She's a member of the Feminist group in the Coordination Council, the political organ of the protest movement that's been around since 2020. The two Hungarian filmmakers, Lili and Lilla Kizlinger, have produced an experimental short film, Freedom of the Fighters, and they documented performances and artistic interventions as we saw them during the occupation of the Budapest, the University for Theatre and Film. And ÖVÜL DURMUŞOİLU is the moderator of the panel discussion today. So welcome to you to the Gorki Theatre. Great to have you all here. Mr. Bester, you have the floor now. Mrs. Langhoff, Mrs. Kütschel, ladies and gentlemen, thank you for giving me a chance to say a few words, but it's, of course, difficult. Well, resistance, the word conjures to my mind less the aesthetics of resistance, but the brutal aspects of it. I talked to the boss of a big organization from my area. I won't tell you who it was. They are currently busy to get their staff out of Ukraine. And he said that after the rules and laws of Ukraine, employers need to continue to pay their employees when they are fighting, defending their country. So some of them accompany their families to Germany, and then they return home to fight for their country. So war is a brutal thing. Resistance in Russia is something where you risk your freedom and more when you go out to the streets and dare to protest in what is an increasingly oppressive system. These are different situations than what we, coming from the West, know. The democratic state in which I grew up was relatively stable when I started to understand it, and this is why the freedom of opinion has never been a question of personal courage, and it was not a risk. And I really have great respect for all those who dare to express their opinion right now. People in Ukraine resist the invasion, and people in Russia who express their protest, that's something that requires huge personal courage, and I really have a lot of respect for it. And I hope that we all will see the light after the darkness has gone, that suppression will be followed by freedom. Where do you get your courage from? From visions, from different views, and art and culture may nourish all that. One shouldn't underestimate it. It gives us all some sort of base and an outlook, and both is important in times like these. This is why what we are going to see in a moment, even if it is plays in another country and under conditions, it confirms that courage and hope can be drawn from art and culture. And in dark moments like the one we have experienced over the past 4 weeks, this is terribly important. So I'm really pleased that we, as the partner of Berliner Korrespondenzen, are the partner here, and it tells us why something about why we are a partner here. It's a resource that also provides us with ideas, with inspiration, something we can draw on, and the exchange with you is a chance for us to learn something, to gather new experience, and we think that foreign policy is more than the exchange between governments. It's an exchange that takes place between people, we believe, within societies and between societies. We want to listen. We want to learn, not with an arrogant gesture from above, but because we are firmly convinced that we can learn something that helps us to understand, to be understood, and we like to do it together with you, with Gorky and the Allianz Kulturstiftung, with Humboldt University, because the exchange of art, culture, science, and politics is a source of hope, I believe, hoping that we will live through these times and walk in the right direction. I'm looking forward to tonight's discussion. Thank you.
Apám ingatja a fejét, már 4 perce kések. Cukrot pakol a presszóba, rámarkol a csészére, felhajtja. Urkákba gyűrődik a bőr a tarkóján. A feje sima és fehér, hetente lenyírja kopaszra. Néha szoktam neki mondani, hogy legyen végre férfi, és hagyja meg a Hitler bajuszt. Jó a humorod, fiam, feleli ilyenkor. Kitől örökölted? Vagy, ha zsidó lesz a feleséged, ígérem, felvarrom a horogkeresztet. Nagyot nevetünk ilyenkor. Így viccelődünk mi egymással. A kávézóban ücsörög, háttal a bejáratnak, hogy ne kelljen kinéznie a Vas utcára. Az úttest túloldaláról figyelem, arcomon maszk. Mögöttem az egyetem, oszlopok közé kifeszített piros-fehér szalagok, néhány fémkordon, meg torlasznak használt, ütött-kopott iskolapadok. Több mint egy hónapja találkoztunk utoljára. Már 6 perce kések, jóleső érzés, hogy rám vár. 40 perc múlva jön értem a taxi, visz majd a tévébe. 40 perc apámmal. Veszek egy mély levegőt, átmegyek az úttesten. A kávézó ajtajában meggondolom magam, lehúzom az arcomról a kék orvosi maszkot, és felteszem a helyére a sárgát. Ez nem provokáció. Ismételgetem némán, miközben lenyomom a kilincset. Jó buli, tudom én. Szalagozgatunk, meg énekelünk, nagy piálások. Be is szívtok, mi? Megmondhatod, sárga maszkos nem viszünk be, szerelmesek belétek az őrsön. De csak finoman megjegyzem, ez nem forradalom, fiam. Ez hiszti.
földet igazgatod, s az ég abroncsait fel alá járatod. Hogy mi az akaratod, én azt tudhatom. Hogy mi az óhajtásod, azt is sajdíthatom. Szép ifjak, egy újságot mondok, jól meghallgassatok.
Tisztelt vendégsereg, most hozzátok fordulok. Mi most egy kis tréfát csinálni akarunk. Azért, aki gondolja, hogy nem érti a tréfát, egy pár percre tessék, hogy hagyja el a mulatószobát.
A széles hazánkban nincsen lehetetlen. Szárnyal a szent lélek, a ti lelkitekben üljön a szívetek, érzőbbik végibe, s oda rakjon tojást 3 rajzébe.
1, 2, na, amért én most eljöttem közétek a sárba, elfogyott a nemzetnek színész regrutája. Az, hogy ez miért történt, ne menjünk most bele. Betegségre egy gyógyírt találjunk ízlibe.
Elmondtuk a problémánkat, ismeritek a bajunk. Értelmiség hiányában sötétségbe fulladunk. Üres a főváros, összes kultúrtere, se múzeum, se kiállítás, elvitte a fene!
Vagy ha nem a fene volt, az ne menjünk most bele.
Harcba hívnak testvérek, büszke kultúrharcba, a nemzetnek szüksége van ilyen vértanúkra.
Üres a sok színház, nem volt bevétele, a főváros sem tudja, mit kezdjenek vele. Jelenleg államgazdaságoknak vannak kiadva, kombányséplőgépek vannak a színpadra állítva, s az a színház, aminek kicsi nézőtere, s egy aratógép sem fér el már a belsejébe. Különösen igaz ez a művész színházakra, kutyamenhelyeknek lettek átalakítgatva.
Na már mostan elég, hagyjuk a nyavajgást. Azért vagyunk itt, hogy találjunk megoldást! Megoldást nemzetünk égető ügyére. Legyen értelmiség nemzetünk szívében.
Tanácskoztak, küldtek, fordultak a néphez, utánpótlást mostan tőletek remélnek. Eljöttünk hát ide, Krisztus erejével, szólítunk titeket, gyertek vitézséggel!
Azonban élt a távoli napkeleten egy csodálatos madár. Fényesebb volt a napnál, ragyogóbb a szivárványnál, és sokkal szebb volt, mint egy drága kő. Mert az ember örök vágyából született.
Apja a szabadság volt, anyja pedig a boldogság. Amerre a tűzmadár szállt, felszakadoztak az ólom nehéz felhők. Kisütött a nap, és szivárvány tündökölt az égen. A szenvedők kínja megenyhült, a megfáradtak új erőre kaptak, az elnyomottak kiegyenesítették gerincüket, a nincstelenek keze ökölbe szorult. Apja a szabadság volt, anyja pedig a boldogság.
Kiüzettetéstől mostanáig
amerre a tűzmadár szállt, felszakadoztak az ólom
fényesebb volt a napnál,
kisütött a nap,
ragyogós szivárvány, és sokkal szebb volt, mint egy
szenvedők kínja megenyhült.
Ezen hatalmasok
Megfáradtak új,
mert az ember örök vágyából.
Elnyomottak gerincek,
hogy tüzet gyújtsanak, mert a
és nincs is szükség ránk. Hol az a kép, ami manipulált? Mindenki néz, és senki se lát. Nincs ellenség, de éhes a szám. Nincs ellenség, és nincs is szükség ránk. Ez az a kép, ami manipulált. Mindenki néz, és senki se lát.
Exciting. Thank you again, Lili and Lilla, for this very special film. Not freedom fighters, but freedom of the fighters. It's really inspiring. But I'm going to connect it to our general also discussion as well. Good evening. This is ÖVÜL Durmuşoğlu, curator, writer and educator. I'm truly honored to be hosting this really powerful gathering with three mighty women who are defining codes and forms of resistance in their communities and beyond. And encouraging us to see beyond. And this is a very, if I may start with my introduction about, if you don't mind, like to generally frame our conversation, Tanya, Olga, and Lilla. It is really a big chance actually to be able to talk within an intergenerational perspective like today, that we don't really have a chance. I want to start our conversation from the perspective of the very much discussed issue of the community, the relationship between community and immunity, because I really do think what makes us a community and that root that brings community and immunity together, the munus is also about our responsibility as art workers, art professionals around the world, because Esposito came, of course, with this really interesting discussion, important discussion about the relationship between the community and immunity, what brings us together and what separates us. And actually the munus, the root of it, is really, it's not only about the duty, but it's also the spectacle, it's about the show, it's also responsibility. I do believe it is at these critical moments of the world, it is our responsibility, it's our munus that brings us together to bring further infrastructures among each other, to encourage each other and to learn from each other for the future, for the institutions of the future who learn their past very well and who are very aware of their past very well, to be able to see the future and beyond. And also tonight, it is basically, we would like to discuss what, within the frame that art and protest, we'd like to discuss what are the possible alliances that we can create today for that new immune system that we need to develop through those infrastructures that we are inspiring for each other and for the future. This particular time shows the polarization of the world exploding, this time on the side of Ukraine and the invasion of Ukraine by Russia. But we know that these polarizations actually have been going on for quite some time in different forms, in different parts of the world. Some of them made it to the Western media and some of them didn't, but that doesn't necessarily mean, of course, that they don't exist. Therefore, after this maybe very brief quote, excuse me for my excitement, it's always not so easy to be in front of such powerful women, so I'm I would love to start from the main conversation from the we. How do we become we? In that space of polarization, how do we become we? How do we produce our new immune system that is not built on the immunity of certain exclusive bodies, but the immune system for us to live together? Butler in 2015 spoke about the grievable lives and non-grievable lives. And she said, one way of posing the question of the we are in these times of war is by asking whose lives are considered valuable, whose lives are mourned, and whose lives are considered ungrievable. And we might think of war as dividing populations into those who are grievable and ungrievable. And an ungrievable life is those that cannot be mourned because it has never been lived. It has never counted as a life at all. So we can see the division of the globe into grievable and non-grievable lives from the perspective of those who wage war in order to defend the lives of certain communities and to defend them against the lives of others, even if it means taking those latter lives. So I'd like to start with the general question for all of us from our perspectives and from our productions, that who are the we today? in these particular conditions of the world, who are the we today, and how can our practices, how can our visions of the artistic can help for that construction to shift our general vision of the world for a larger horizon of the world. So, Tanya, would you like to start, or would you like, Lili, please. Come on.
We.
The we. Because, I mean, if, let's say, if we specify from the film, I mean, this is one of the really major resistances that also happened in the center of Europe. Again, a polarization that has been going on for quite a while, for taking the autonomy of the arts for the Film and Theater University. But this also has been a really major populist nationalist policy making that really also shifted the whole artistic environment and the whole institutional environment before. And then your resistance came in. So maybe you can tell about, like, how did your we started, and how do you see it today now after making this film?
Well, actually, like, first of all, I wasn't part. Like, I already graduated when we made the film. So I was almost as if anyone who lives in Budapest and cared about film or arts or whatever, that I took part of the protests. And then when we started making the film, and actually why we gave the title Freedom of the Fighters, is because I think that the first we is within everybody in self. And it was just straight after that we finished shooting when I moved to the States. And before, like, even while we were doing it, I was thinking that I'm kind of like in a, like, that I'm lucky because I'm very free in myself. And then I was just like helping this whole cause, but I was kind of out of it already. And just when I went to the States, I realized that I wasn't free myself inside either. So that was the first we that I had to, like, understand, you know, like, and that's all the things that I loved and what I cared for when I went to the protests and I saw that people were doing such free things. Meanwhile, there was this great oppression happening. That's what, like, I had to say, like, critiqued in myself, if I would be able to do that, because I was really just, like, standing next to them, not, like, participating, actually. So my answer would be that the first we is, like, we inside the two of us.
But how did you, how did that we that you saw shift your practice? Do you think it is transforming that experience, even though you say that you're not directly participating? But I think you did, because witnessing it, making this film, is participating in it. Participation has so many codes and so many ways of doing. So from our position, I think generally that we really see this is your participation by translating that experience to us. But I'm really curious, as a young filmmaker, as two young filmmakers, also saying hi to Lilla over there, is it that we, that realization of the we, is it moving your work or the way you see your work to a different direction?
Yes, it gives me more work to do.
Always. That's a very good answer. Please go ahead.
I think in the case of Cuba, we had to go from the we that was imposed to us by the Cuban regime. And that's the we everybody outside of Cuba wants to see. That's a we that is completely fake and that we are, I can say the Cubans have been performing that we for 60 years. And sometimes it's
longest
funny.
Ongoing performance.
The longest ongoing performance, Marina, sorry. But part of what happened is that that performance is also done very carefully in front of foreigners, because Cubans know what is expected of them, what people want to see, and sometimes they perform happiness. And sometimes people go away from and say, oh, why? They're so happy. And this is all, and this is the performance of happiness. They're not happy, they're just using this idea of humor as a way to escape the situation. But also they are like, oh, they're hungry, they're poor, but they're so happy. And this is the problem we have in Cuba, that the Cuban people have changed the concept of the we, but people outside of Cuba still want to see the other we. So I think this is the biggest transformation I think we had in Cuba, which I called in this new revolution that has happened in the last 2 years, that also is not new. It had 60 years of a silence and oppressed series of action by many brave Cubans who wanted freedom. And it kind of galvanized or came to a very visual situation maybe in the last year or so. But also part of this we has been a long learning experience with a lot of people, because also the press don't want to see the we. They want to see the heroic figure, the one person that one day wake up and in 5 minutes change a government. Because that's the very good narrative. I mean, I'm making, of course, exaggeration, but they always look to this character that later can be in a Hollywood film, you know? And it's important to not be that character, that go against that character, you know? And it's important, and I think in Cuba, we have been very mature, the artists and intellectuals and the people in general who rebel against the regime have been very intelligent at understanding when we give a space to one person and to another. Because sometimes we understand that people need to see one story that is easy to understand, and sometimes we need to show them they're not alone. This is not an exception, because the other problem is Cuba has always been an exception, and we have to eliminate that forever, please. Because when the Russia colonies existed, the Soviet colony existed, we were not considered Soviet colony. We were an exception. You know, when the whole thing collapsed, we were not being taken care of like the other people in terms of discourse. And the same, you know, that all the time we are this exception. And we are not. We are part of the world that want, and part of the young people, not in my case anymore, but the Cuban artists, they want to change things that are wrong, you know? So I think it has been a very beautiful coming together. I think we did this kind of horizontal and consensus-based activities. And yeah, I think this is the new we that I hope everybody sees. Yeah.
And do you think that after, I mean, I know that for the last 2 years before you came, you have been engaged also against this law that 349 that defines art as suspicious, de facto suspicious. But I hope that there are other channels also for this we to be communicated to the world, and I'm trusting art there also as a medium of communication.
Yeah, the unfortunate thing right now, first we have the 349, which was a way to legalize censorship in Cuba. Now we have the 373, the 317, the 35. We have so many laws now. They are changing the penal code. We have so many new laws that there is no time, enough time to even us educate before we tell other people. You know, it's like constant, yeah. But yeah, I think, yeah. This is the new challenge.
And Olga, this would be also very inspiring to hear from your side, from also on behalf of like the, let's say, the very mighty resistance that you built in Belarus, and the kind of care structure that also you built with that we. So it would be really beautiful also to hear it from your particular position, that we, that vision of we.
When we talk about the protests, or progress as we call it, that took place in Belarus in the summer of 2020, started there in fact, I would say that we have experienced this we, and the we was a process, because we really stood together during the protests. We rediscovered many things anew, and we were impressed by how long people were willing to protest. So it was a process, as I said, but naturally you should also be aware of the different forms of solidarity, because if it were a natural process, then this solidarity was just terribly important, and you need new things all the time so that the process is kept alive, continues to develop a spirit of solidarity. Well, most people saw lots of photos with Belarusian women. Why did they play such an important role? They did play such an important role because they proposed new forms of activities every day. Maria Kalisnikova, Svetlana Tiranovsky, and Svetlana Sepkala, these were three women who had no shared identity, but they had shared objectives. They were longing for freedom. Then we had women's marches. That's a different thing. On these marches, the women showed that they were determined to look after one another, to care for another. Then sisterhood in prison, that was another form of activity to make women stronger, to be aware of the vulnerability, but to overcome it. So they were able to show to the whole of society that we are able to overcome that. We are vulnerable, but we can overcome it, and we can find new strength in it. And the basis for all that is solidarity and mutual support. I think this was all we, not a substantial form, but a kind of liquid, fluid form. Solidarity, mutual support, discovery of new forms of protest, and the peaceful protests have helped to reach out to all corners of society, because people received a new impetus day in, day out. And the very fact that people became aware that they are vulnerable helped them to understand that they too should be part in these protests. I think it was a new experience for them, and I presume that this is the kind of pattern that would work, that probably already exists in other parts of the world. Not in exactly the same ways, but people recognize themselves in these protests. They develop a new type of creativity and support one another.
Yes, this is something also that I would love to highlight. How do you see the role of the artistic in the we? From your position as a philosopher and as an organizer and as an activist. So what is that position of the artistic? How does it play a role in that we, with all of these communities that are coming together to say a new word?
Well, artistic practices have been important all those months and years. Modern art, music, but not only. On the one hand, the Belarusian artists got more political, and on the other, society itself presented itself as an artistic community. People painted posters, for example. They were terribly creative, and their artistic practice led to a new language emerging in the process. So we communicated with others using the creative artistic channels that suddenly developed. So it came from the artists and it came from the participants in the protests, and they all acted together.
And I would like to connect maybe one of the things that we are a lot discussing among ourselves, how our strategies are being co-opted on the other side, how actually things that we read about ourselves, let's say, saying those new things before we realize, like, become a strategy or mechanism on the other side. Do you really see again, like the artistic visions or like that imagination space, maybe one can call also third space, art provides, can help us like to overcome that co-option and trauma and victimization, I would say also. So I would love to hear your positions on that. Lili, do you want to say something also from...
Can I ask too?
Sure, of course.
I was wondering, like, what you said before about this fake we that you had in Cuba. And I was just interested in how did you like deconstruct it in yourself? Because I imagine that all countries kind of have a fake we. And when you start to like make work about the we, the first thing that comes along is to...
Yeah. That's a nice question, thanks.
Well, I deconstruct the we because I believe the we. And I realized it was fake. Like I put a test that we. I put a test propaganda and it didn't pass. So that's how I discovered, trying to, and also understanding what I felt. Because many times, the truth, but you don't have maybe the equipment, like intellectual equipment, or you don't have maybe the training to understand what you're feeling and why you're feeling it. So I had to do a lot of work, to understand why I felt certain things, because many times those authoritarian regimes and those dictatorships make you feel guilty about what you feel and make you doubt yourself, So I think this is a big exercise of humility, but at the same time, making sure that why you are understanding where does it come from. But I also want to say that you were so great also, like both of you are amazing. But I was thinking, and I think one of the reasons, and I'm an artist, and why I think art and activism can be successful is in part because we can create things they are not expected. The artists work with unexpected. And many times I feel people in power have a pre-trained answer to demonstration, to people coming to the office to protest. Like, I'm not saying these are wrong strategies. I think they should be done as well. But I know they know us, we are both fighting each other. So we know them, they know us. And sometimes they know in advance how to respond. And I feel that what art gives is the unexpected to them. So, and I always say that the time when you can do really political actions is when the person you are confronting is left without an answer. They don't expect this and they don't know how to react. And the time that they figured out how to oppress you again is the time you have to do the work, And this is what I do with my art, and many Cuban artists also do this. And the other thing is, in Cuba, the law is preventive. Like there is called a pre-delinquent law. So they actually, we live in like Minority Report, basically. So they put you in jail, not because what you did, but what the political police think you might do. So, for example, I remember one day I had a meeting in the House to explain something that the government said that was not true. And then they came and tell me, we are not going to allow you to go out in the street and protest. And I say, thank you, I didn't thought about it. Now I have the idea. So they always think, they kind of get in your head and try to, this is why I also like to do what I call art for the not yet. So it's an art that is not reacting to power, but it is putting the people in power in a situation of defense. You know, because part of what happens with activism sometimes is that we are, this idea of vulnerability, no, that you were saying, that we are defending ourselves, you know? And they should defend themselves because they're the ones doing the things wrong, you know? So, I don't know, this is something I want to say.
Definitely. That also... Yeah, would you like to say on top of the answer something?
I don't know, like the whole reaction thing is very bothering to me, honestly. Like, I feel that it's really hard to escape the role that you always have to react. It's like the best way to me to understand it's like in a relationship, if I'm always the one who reacts, is a very, like, not something that you would want, no? And how do you create a situation when you're the one who is the active, who makes the action, and the recipient is the reactive? And I don't know.
I mean, as a digression, I think what you are touching is something very critical about the way political subjectivity is understood today, because I think because a lot of our memories are erased via various interventions. May these interventions be totalitarian regimes, may there be burning of the archives, may there be coup d'etats, you know, there are various ways of doing that. That people, I think, do think the reactionary is the political speech, the political position. And this is also, of course, what the post-truth politics gives us. No, it's like the post-truth politics wants us to understand, like it's only through the reactionary you can be political. No, there are so many languages of like the political, and there are also a lot of different generations and communities of people also within our history that exercise that. But we are generally not really given those histories, share those histories for one reason or the other, unless, you know, we have our ways of access to them. So I think it is something really very important to understand, like how to build a genuine political subjective language really today. And then it's not based on reaction and the reactionary, because also the reactionary, I believe so, something so much part of the neoliberal also as well. I don't know if you'd like to comment, both of you, for this.
Well, maybe I connect with what Tania had been saying already about artists, and that the artists are actually deliver like the basis for something new, and they start with something new. And I think there's this idea of empowerment, that's for sure. I think that's what the artists do during the protests. But it is also about inspiration, because there are artists, if I remember, there were musicians during the protests, and there was like flying something which was present in subway stations or in department stores, and you find like new places for the protests. They discover new forms for the protests. And what the artists showed all the time is that protest is possible everywhere and at any time. And this is what politics need. I mean, if there are problems, you need to draw attention to these problems and to react on these problems. And the artists showed that they gave this attention, they were ready to react, and they had the necessary inspiration. And what else they did, these artists, is they created kind of archives. Yeah, they documented, they showed the bodies of people who had been beaten. They showed what was happening, and at the same time, I mean, things were happening, and the artist wanted to keep records of these events, that we should not forget it. And that's not only a movement, but they also had these moments of stepping back. And we also need spaces for reflection, to understand what we are doing. And all this is very important. This is what it should be, to draw attention, response, reflection. That's all what we also need in the political field, to have a serious perception of reality of the situation, to find the right response and answer, to document, to comment. And that's what we see during the protests. That's what I've seen in Belarus. That's all what has been done by the artists.
Yeah, I totally agree with you. And I think that another aspect of why artists, I think, is interesting to have art and activism together, is because artists not only can show the king is naked, but also not only they can also condense ideas that are floating around in a one sentence or one gesture that everybody can see reflected on, but also they are able to not only see the future, but make other people see that future. And this is what a lot of governments are afraid of. And so, you know, so this quality that artists have to make other people see something is also, I think, important, because, for example, in our cases, we are not trying, we are not fighting anymore the institutions, the authoritarian and dictatorial, the institution and corrupt institutions in Cuba. We are trying to create parallel institutions that works the way we like it, the way we want, the way they should be for the society we want, you know? So also we are showing the people in power what we want, you know, and also showing the power that we have at the same time. And I think related to the post-truth, Cuba, as well as Soviet Union, was one of the, has 60 years experiences in fake news and post-truth. And part of, and this is important because one of the challenges we have as artists is how to reflect what is actually happening in Cuba. Because, for example, here we have Hamlet da Bastida, who was in prison in Cuba for many months. And he lost 20 pounds in this, and he feel, you know. And then he was telling me yesterday that they brought him for 6 days to a special house when they knew they're going to release him. So he get fed, he had some better color, the skin, the sun, you know. And they do the same. We know, activists in Cuba know that when somebody's taken into prison after a protest, depending how many days they take to release them, is how bad they were beaten. Because they're trying people not to see the bruises, you know? And also, how can you, as an artist, show what is happening in Cuba when you have a mother that wants to enter the trial of his minor, because this guy was 17 years old, And the answer of the government, of the regime, was to put her in prison. Like, how do you reflect that reality, no? How do you read the Cuban press saying there is no war in Russia, this is fake news, that there is a small conflict of misunderstanding between the two nations? So how do you work with this, you know? It's also a big challenge for this post-truth thing. And yeah, so this is part of the challenges we have, you know, because also sometimes you cannot say the truth with images, you know, which is something powerful. Sometimes you have to create trust in the people because, you know, you only have your word, you know, which is tough.
Which actually brings me to another question about the truth telling and storytelling. Because the sharing of the stories or telling different stories or storying otherwise is something, a strategy that is being discussed or being shared also widely in different resistance circles. There is a thin line that separates maybe truth-telling, storytelling, but there are also a lot of things that bring them together. Do you think like these two, let's say, strategies, do you really see that in what makes the effect that emotion politically effective?
The problem is that the Cuban regime has a strategy which is transform your direct experience, like transform a witness into an opinion. And this is a very, very smart strategy because you are telling people your experience, but they say that's just your opinion. So you cannot even be a victim in Cuba, which is an interesting thing. Like the regime don't allow you to be a victim. It's always becoming like, no, this person is bought by some foreign interest. Like it's always trying to, you know, take the trust people can have on you. No, now it's very difficult because 11th of July, a lot of people rise and the whole Cuba. So it's kind of they have been a hard time saying it's all fake. But in response, what they have done is they give sentences to up to 30 years to some people. There are some around 30-some minors, and some of these have been condemned for more years in prison than the years they have lived as a person. And this is kind of the idea of substituting the desire of having a different space to be together and to build of a society by the imposition of terror, you know? So they cannot, people in Cuba are not afraid anymore, so now terror is the new strategy, you know? Like, oh, if you put something on Facebook, you go 10 years in prison, no, if you know. So there is no...
That sounds very familiar.
Yeah, exactly.
Someone coming from Turkey, that sounds also very familiar.
Exactly. I think I said long time ago, they must have like I don't know what color it is, but a little book, you know, where all of them, Erdogan and the guy from Philippines, all of them, you know, share. Because they kind of copying each other.
The alt-right wisdom. The patriarchal alt-right wisdom book.
Yeah, but this is another exception with Cuba. Cuba is a neoliberal place that don't care about their citizens, but people still think it's a socialist, left wing. They're not left. Sorry to break it to you. So please join us, leave them.
Olga, would you like to also think about the power of truth-telling, storytelling, and how does it contribute to the care structures that you have mentioned? So how, for example, can those experiences of prison, those experiences of sisterhood, can be shared and narrated so that, you know, it can be a common vision and a common experience.
Well, on one hand, the history of the terror by Lukaschenko is nearly present in nearly every household, because so many people have been beaten, mistreated, and have been to prison. Now we have 100,000 political prisoners, but through to the protests, another 40,000 went through these legal institutions and have been punished with prison for certain days. So in each household, these narratives are being told, of course, because people just talk to each other, of course, also these stories. But on the other hand, people describe these stories. There are diaries, there are press articles, scientific articles, and how do these narratives help in this Russian context to understand? Well, on one hand, is to help understand that society is in a very difficult and traumatic situation, but on the other hand, it was also the starting point for breaking up of this society, and we should not underestimate this. This could help us to find our strength, our power, and this is the sisterhood, that within our vulnerability we find the strength and the forces to find new forms of mutual support and new forms of solidarization. And well, the stories help on one hand to overcome these traumatic experience, on the other hand, to find new energy and forces in these experiences. And I think this duality is very important in our situation.
And Lilla, I also find this question particularly interesting for the way you narrate in the film, that you, for the freedom of the fighters, that you are actually telling us various stories the student community had experienced and will continue also to experience. What, if you can maybe share with us, what drove you to also to tell that story in this particular format that you decide to share in this film? Because I know that there's also another documentary work that you had done on site, you know, what students also experienced, but this is a really different perspective that you are coming with in this film.
The other film is not made by us, and like we imagined that this would support, these two films would support each other, so we didn't include any facts, so it's probably not so good to you now. And what comes to my mind is that I saw this film, I forgot who made it, of 9/11, when the Twin Towers fell, and this guy, who was, by the way, an artist, but he was just at home on his terrace, and he recorded the whole thing in one shot, like 5 hours, or I don't know. And we watched it in a class, and obviously like the first hour passed with a lot of like thoughts and actualities and like the trauma and everything. And at some point you could feel it in the room, how it shifted and it became aesthetic or something. And then the people started to think about it in a completely different way. And then people who had because there were Americans in the room, so they had actual stories and relatives or friends of friends, or so they were involved. And even they said that it was a big help for them to deal with their traumas and their stories, and it was purely aesthetic and very abstract. And this is a way that I felt that I could connect to any story that this gives you enough space to like have your own thoughts on something. And this is also why we decided to like have the titles in the end of the film and not in the beginning. And you were saying that there are a lot of things that we might need to like describe, like what symbolizes what and what we try to tell. But I really think that the great thing is that we really don't have to, and that's like a question I have for both of you, the three of you. Sorry, I have a lot of questions. Yeah, is that like you have those local problems that like each time you get a question, you're like so Cuba, and you're like Belarus, and it happens to all of us, but then we have all these global problems at the same time. And I feel that a lot of times only abstract work can give me access as an audience to things that I'm not experiencing locally. So like, if it's not abstract enough, I know I should care, but it's really hard to care because it's not really, like, it doesn't have to do much with the human experience. It's more of the, I don't know how to call it, political experience or like local experience. And it's just, yeah.
I mean, what you're opening up is a major is a major discussion here, because while we are, I mean, from the very beginning, we said, of course, we are coming from our local positions in this particular discussion, but those questions are really on the global story. They are the ones that make the global story. So there is not another global story, I don't think, apart from these stories that we are actually sharing. So question of abstraction there for me, yeah. For me is, yeah, I mean, it can really open a different discussion.
We were talking before we came here. We sat in a table and talked about different things. And you were talking about the idea of universalism, like the idea of things that are universal, like kind of, you know, old-fashioned to say, you know, global. But, and also we were discussing, all of us, how the idea of the universal had a problem. The problematization of the universal is that it was only or mostly being generated and legitimized when it was done by the former metropolis to the colonies. You know, it was a way to tell the people that were conquering, we are like you, but we are kind of better, but we are like you, so we have things in common. But when it was the other way around, it doesn't happen. When the people who is, I say colonies, but we can say immigrants, we can say like any women, we can say LGBT, we can say many, many groups that are not being heard, then they are condemned, quote unquote, to be a specific problem. So this not being translated to a general global or universal interest. This is just your problem. So this is one side of the answer I'm going to give you. The other side is I personally feel that the political has to be localized. Sometimes this big generic approach to the political, I'm also part of it, okay, because, you know, I tattooed the no borders, okay, but you have to always land it somewhere, because there is a danger of this generalization that becomes a kind of virtual signaling pain that people bring to the world, like say, oh, I'm also with you, but why? What are you doing? Like, you know, you have to be concrete. I think the political is concrete. As Florian Book said, the truth is concrete, the political is also concrete, you know? So it needs to be localized, so you understand the pain, and you can make out of that something. Otherwise, you're weeping.
Yeah, but I feel like it's something that's not fashionable. Right
I don't
now.
care about fashion, sorry.
Yeah, I mean, it's great, but it's just like something that's not like that.
But that's a problem. The same idea of this idea of activists being celebrities. I hate that. I think this is so stupid. You know, like, this is, no, because then you lose your freedom as an activist, because then you have to perform for an audience that expects something of you as an activist. And you have to say the right things. And no, I love to say the wrong things because I'm an activist, you know?
Yes, thank you.
And this is what happens with this generalization. And then, you know what I mean? It's complicated. It's not so simple.
What happens when you like lend yourself, your body to your work? Because that's kind of makes you into more of a celebrity. Like you become more like, you know, like the focus of the attention when you're part of the work, no?
No, but I mean, we're not talking about my work here, we're talking about activism. And actually part of what happened in Cuba, and we have witnessed it here because they were part of the process of the new revolution, as I like to call it, or the real revolution, is that, for example, people like me and others, I had to go into background because I didn't want to take so much space, you know? Because then you don't let other people take the space and do the work, and you know what I mean? So I was very purposely sometimes like disappearing, you know? So other people can, you know. So this is also, you have to know this, no? About the, we're talking about care, no? Yeah. This is also.
Go ahead, Olga. I would like to bring it also to another question that I think would be really beneficial for all of us. Yeah.
I would like to continue the discussion as to whether we should localize our movement or whether we should talk about a universal movement. I believe that we should use the local context. We should be very vigilant. We can talk about Ukraine. We should really take care, put the focus on Ukraine. I have the impression that the war in Ukraine is not taken seriously enough. But we should also discover the universal dimension of it all, which is also a physical one. People cross the border to leave their country. People die. People die, which is registered locally, but it should also be registered universally. These are people like us. These are not just third-category people who do not deserve our support. I would say that universalism today must be rediscovered. We need to perceive that there are people everywhere in the world, no matter where. Ukraine is probably not seen with all seriousness, also because Russia had developed a very strong discourse. I don't know why Ukraine is still in the shadow.
Okay, so we are kind of running out of time, but like. Please tell, and then I have one more question to maybe round it up. Then I'm given the sign. That's like, yeah.
I agree with you, but I will substitute the word universalism and universal by the word, I don't know the word exactly, but something like empathy or understanding or accompanying something, because it's not the same the people who leave Ukraine to save their life that the people who receive them. And it's not the same, the fact that in Cuba, right now we have the biggest immigration since 1994, but it's silent, okay? Because it's not 20 people in a raft, although they still have raft living, but these are Cubans going to any country in the world who can enter without visa, including Russia, and including, you know, Serbia and other countries like this. And now, and it's not the same, you know. Or for example, the fact that the Cuban president talked to the Nicaraguan president, and they decide they are not going to put more visas for Cubans to go, you know. So yes, Cubans are leaving Cuba in thousands every day. It's horrible. But for example, Guatemalans are living in Guatemala, and Mexicans are living in Mexico, and people are living from all over the world. The fact that we are having the same problem should not be seen as everybody's equal in the same problem, because it's not the same. It's not the same when you come undocumented in the United States from leaving Salvador because you are escaping Maras, who are this, this paramilitary army, or when you are leaving from Cuba because you're leaving a dictatorship that will put your kid in, like, this is a real story, that will put your kid in prison because he was in a photo of the protest, And it's not the same when you are fleeing Ukraine because you can die, or because you want to say, like the other day I saw a woman who sent her kid alone out to save the kid, and she stayed fighting, So yes, we all have the same problems. We are general problems that we all have to solve, but we need to respect the specificity of the experience of each person. So that's my point. But yeah, I agree with you.
I think this can be really very nicely connected to the final question actually that we discussed around the table for a citizenship beyond nation state, for a citizenship beyond passports, for a citizenship that is connected through concerns, with concerned citizens who are becoming politicized to change the narrative, to change the narratives, the status quo narratives of the world. But at the same time, caring for those differences. So can we maybe take a final words about that kind of concern citizenship, then kind of a new citizenship that can be actualized, and through what? For sure, it's not through the political correctness of I always be on the right kind of history, but if you'd like to say something, that would be good. No, you don't have that.
Well, what crosses my mind in the situation of the war now, that we should be open towards new stories, to new understanding of each other, without stereotypes, and have a clear look onto the war. Because during this war in Ukraine, it's also about support, solidarity, and not only worries about women and men beyond these binary structures what people develop, even under these conditions. And maybe a new citizenship is this openness towards stories and of different people, of different communities, and this attention to stereotypes, to hierarchies. Because even in this situation of the war, we have to deal with hierarchies. And if we're able to confront all these questions with such an openness, this is a big step towards overcoming further borders and frontiers.
Yeah, I think, going back to my previous answer, I think that I have to say something before. So the idea of the universal, I think the only thing that I find, the thing I find is could be universal is the fact that we can learn from anyone, and this is the thing that is not actually being done. But the fact that, for example, now we see Ukraine, and what is happening to Ukraine, I think the ex-colonies of Soviet Union are very afraid, because they are seeing ghosts all over again. So I don't know. To answer your question now, I will love a place. I mean, I don't have the answer, but I would love the place where people in power rotate. So you don't have all the time a president. So there is like a council of people who can, I don't know. And in terms of citizenship, I think, I'm not sure. We are all, we in Cuba is trying to build that up. When we have the complete answer, I tell you when we're talking. But I think we're trying to figure that out. We're trying to figure it out in Cuba.
Lilla, do you want to add to that for the final word?
I just had one short thought that for
because of the questions afterwards, of course, yes.
Just
before questions, sorry,
on the it was a question, but I had my own answer that I don't really believe, or I can't really feel in a universal way towards any problems. And I think that the root is because I don't believe that there's such a thing as altruism. So I think that in order to care for something, you have to make it your own. And it's in human relationships or any kind of relationship. So if I want to care about something, I have to have a relationship with it, and then I can care. And I find it very upsetting how it's expected from us to behave in a way as if we cared when we all know about each other that we actually don't. And just that.
Well, so thank you. Maybe before turning to you, it would be really nice to be reminded of Willem de Bois's words from The Souls of the Black Folks in 1903, when he wrote, actually, the tragedy of the man, the humans. It's not about that they are arrogant or they are wild and violent, but the big tragedy of the humans that humans really don't know about each other. So I think this is the essence of our also question when we are discussing about the caring, the knowing, and knowing about the differences. So with that, I would like to I'd like to make our audience also part of our conversation with their questions and comments. So we'd love to, it's a little bit difficult to see because of the light, but we'd love to, it would be lovely to hear you. Let's pull, okay. So let's pull, it would be nice to pull the questions, so we pass around the mic. Yeah. Thank you for the lights, yes.
Thank you. My name is Kathleen Hansing. My question, I'd like to pick up on something that Tania mentioned about this massive immigration from Cuba, as it's happening right now. But it's a pattern we can see in other countries happening too, and it's politically motivated. So we see it now also in Russia. We've seen it in Hong Kong, we've seen it in Turkey, yes. And I don't know if any of you read this amazing article by Anne Applebaum, came out I think in the Atlantic a few months ago, called "The Bad Guys Are Winning." I highly recommend it. And it picks up on this idea that a lot of these authoritarian regimes are really using the strategy of pushing out any critical voices, thinkers, amongst others, obviously, intellectuals and artists. And so I wanted to ask all of you, how, and all of you are part of this problem. Look, Tania now lives in Boston, and Olga lives here in Germany, and Hamlet is here, and there are many others. The question is, how do you deal with this when so many of the oppositional thinkers are now being forced out, have to regroup, have to find new systems of care? How do you do what you are all just talking about, what's so important to do,
Thank you. That's a great point. Is there any? Can we pull another question? Oh yes, please.
Thank you. My name is Judith, and I wanted first to comment on your last talk about you have to make something yours to care. I think this is very true, but maybe the universal or the global it makes it possible that we care about different things and we don't do it anymore along national identities, for example, and we open the space up and we can be much more experimental in caring about something or finding stories or making others learn from different stories. This is one comment, so I do think this is not just problematic. It is just the humbleness that kicks in that Tania mentions, that we are small and we can just connect to as certain people. My question would be, you talk a lot about activism and art and the possibility of art, and you didn't mention at all the word imagination.
I did mention, I always use imagination, I used it.
Yeah, but maybe not in the answers. And I was just wondering, because imagination, as far as my experience goes, is like a very substantial way to survive also, let's say, prisonhood, or especially of intellectuals being imprisoned, that in my experience, people talk a lot about imagination as force. So it's not just the force or the documentation you mentioned in Belarus, you know, that artists are documenters. So this is one question where imagination is also like the connecting the human moment, and that we all share. And my other question is how you deal with the conflicts and the contestation in your own social movements. I mean, these are not just monolithic movements, and they are all solidary with each other. I mean, my experiences in different parts of the world also shows that social movements have a lot of conflicts. And the we you talk is in the beginning a we, and then it becomes another we, and then we split, and then one doesn't talk to the other. So it's not, there is not a big we, it's like a shifting we. And how do you deal with the conflicts in your own movements, also in order of the representation to the outside? Because you want to remain strong, but you also want to reflect.
Thank you. Is there another question or comment who would like to add? Kind of here. So actually, like I see the questions. If I can summarize. One question is again about like the resilience strategies when all critical voices are forced into various forms of silence, including having to leave. How do we survive with that? How can we build resilience strategies under such conditions? Is I would see as one question, and the other is of course about the agency of imagination. Today I think it is even much more wider than it's. We really also need to imagine the political again. We need to imagine citizenship again. We need to imagine justice again. So there are so many things to imagine again, to give agency to imagination, and then comes the third position about, of course, like the movements are not monolithic and there are different voices within. How do we reflect inside the we? How do we reflect inside ourselves for these other voices to think on each other? So, did I miss anything from the? It's a summary, but yeah.
So I think people in totalitarian and dictatorships, regimes, only imagine one thing, that people are going to take their power away. And this means that they are the ones who are afraid. So I think I think imagination is very important, as you say, and I mention it also when I say that artists can imagine, not only imagine a different future, but they can show it to people. I think they are, imagination is very powerful because it's the way to be together. When you share that desire, or when you can feel that you want something different. Regarding living, okay. In my case, I trade my living for something. So the Cuban regime, they proposed me 4 times to leave the country. And when I say propose, it wasn't a nice way. It was with menaces and threats and saying that I was going to go to jail for 20 years and blah, blah, blah. And I always say, no, I'm not leaving. Because I felt I had to stay at that point, you know, because I felt more useful there than anywhere else. Then, and also I wanted them to understand that threatening people was not going to work, you know, so they were not going to decide what I was going to do or when. Then it happened that I actually put conditions. I said to them, I call them, the only time I have called them is I say, okay, I have a proposal to go to teach now in Boston, in a very good school, and I really don't care if I go there 5 years or I go to prison 5 years, but I know you really want me to go. So much that the last time they talked to me about leaving, they say, if you have problem with money, do not worry, we'll put you in the plane. That's how desperate they were that I left. And then I say, I know you really want me to go. I have this opportunity now, for example, but I don't care. And this is important. I think they need to understand that you don't care. What is done to you, what is done, not to the others, but to you. That you care about the others, but not about you, you know? And I say, I go if you liberate all these people. And I had a list with independent journalists, with kids, like underage, with people from the 27N movement who are in prison, and it's the one I belong to, and with other like Luis Manuel Otero and Michael Osorbo, and a person that is in prison just for going out and put a little written note saying he wants the liberation of them, and so on. So of course I had like 40 people in my list. I didn't make 40 people. Like I was, you know, it was a theater piece. I perform theater for the Cuban government all the time. And whether it's interrogation sessions or it is this kind of sessions. And what I was performing was, I'm going to take something out of you, you know, because those people who are in dictatorship, one of the strategies they have is to try to learn what is your desire. What do you desire? And they use that as a way to control you. So one of the first things I tell all my friends in Cuba is like, if you want to start this life, you have to not desire anything but freedom for the country. And in this case, they were the one who desired because they wanted me to leave. And it was important also for me that, and also Hamlet was in the list. It was important to me that they understood that the activists in Cuba were stepping in the political arena. And they were not going to be victims anymore, but they could be the one taking something out of them. And they actually liberated 24 people. They didn't do 40. But, you know, and then I was very like, Hamlet had to be out. And they say, if you go. And I say, I don't trust you. Well, it was a big fight there. And they say, yes. And it's funny because the day they liberate Hamlet, the guy who is the people who, they assign people from the secret police to activists, the one that assigned to follow me all the time, tell another person, tell Tania that we, sabe, que cumplimos, no? How you say that? Like we did our word. We were good for our word, you know? And that was very bizarre. Very bizarre. But I think that was the moment I realized that we could keep taking something out of them. And because they are the ones who are afraid. So this is my answer to that. In relation to leaving, the real reason I left was, yes, because I wanted to do this gesture that I have to tell you, I didn't believe they were going to go for it. I just did like arrogant, because sometimes with these people you have to be like a little arrogant. It happened halfway, okay. But the reason I also left is because at that time I wasn't able to do anything anymore. Like I had police outside of my house the whole time. I was put in house arrest since November 16 to August 27 when they delivered me to the airport, where there were other people there. They have nothing to do, apparently, a lot of money, because there were so many people there waiting for me, like if I was a drug dealer, a terrorist, So at this point, and this happened with other activists as well. I mean, the people who have nothing, they have to leave because they have nothing, And the government is pushing them so hard, they're making them feel there will never be nothing, So they have no other option. But the activists and artists who are leaving is because we discuss among us and so on, and we know that outside, me being here makes more damage than me being in my house 10 more days with the police outside, no internet, people cannot go to my house and we cannot plan anything. And actually, a friend of mine, when I left Cuba, say, I'm glad you are out because I was getting bored with your story. This is a friend of mine. Of course, somebody who is in the universal world. And it was like, I was getting bored because we knew every day, because I was taking photo of the police as a number. So I was taking photo every morning of what number, and I was making joke like, play your lucky number, like making, And then at some point, they put the same all the time. So I had the same number, but they changed the people, no? So they see the Instagram of people. So he was saying, so also this is something the government do. They make people who are the audience of those situations to be bored, So you don't keep the interest and you lose the attention. So I think many of us are going out because we are creating resistance in a different way. And right now, it's not me. Is Catherine Biscayne in Spain, Hamlet here, the other one there, another people there, Carolina. There are so many people around the world right now who are part of this movement. They are telling everyone like you what is happening in Cuba. And I think this is also very important. And we are all going back, just so you know.
Olga, please.
Take me with.
Tania said a lot of very important things, so it's for me to be brief. What would happen to Belarus when all intellectuals, writers, people who want to become politicians leave the country and go abroad? No, I can't imagine that all of them go. There are people who are stubbornly saying, we stay here, we will try to do what we can under the difficult conditions we have here. We will defend our human dignity in this difficult time. We will set an example to other people. This, too, is an option, or perhaps the only one to fight. In 2021, more than 600 NGOs were closed in Belarus. But these are just the most visible ones, the biggest ones. People organize from the bottom up again. They do it now in private homes. They have small events there, exhibitions, whatever. They try to do something. These people need to be in touch with one another. What is important for intellectuals, artists, and others to go abroad, to draw new strength. One of my colleagues is a filmmaker. Vienna now, and she is developing a new concept for making films, and she's establishing relations with people who want to do that together with her. And such projects, short-term things taking a week or a month, are important. Residence programs are important. People go there. Some prefer to stay outside the country for longer, but this atmosphere of wanting to return, definitely returning because they have a duty vis-à-vis their country. That's very strong. People living outside their home country need support as well, just as those in Belarus need support. So there's a close network inside and outside. There are political prisoners. We shouldn't forget about them either. We write letters, and it's important that the letters of support come from all over the world, so that the people in prison can see that they are not forgotten. So there are a number of strategies that work. The second question referred to imagination. Well, what I have seen in Belarus is that imagination has materialized. People did not only want to discuss new forms of commonality, how to organize in the neighborhoods. They wanted to do something material, something tangible. And perhaps this is also a sign of the times. The material level is important. Imagination alone is not enough. You need to have a hands-on approach, and you want to achieve something tangible, and the new media help very much. Well, as far as the breaks in the wheel are concerned, well, we all know about it. And for me, the decision is that as a philosopher, I should try to understand it and to look for the antagonistic spaces in the definition, and to see where the breaks can form in the various debates and what to do with them. Second, you need patience. Sometimes I have to tell myself that I'm not in agreement with this or that, but I need to be patient and see that it serves a long-term development, and that it wouldn't make sense to rush things right now. We need to find a language as to how to criticize things, how to talk to one another, and I think this is part of the strategies we are discussing here. So you have to actively search for such strategies, because spaces for antagonism and dissent must be there, but we need to look for them, look after them, and put them into shape. So there will be something emerging in these spaces which we don't actually expect. But if we try hard to shape these spaces, there won't be so much breaks in the wheel.
Huh? We missed one question, the one about the groups, no? When inside the group are different. Yeah. Okay.
Do you want to answer?
Yes. I think one thing that is also very unfair is that the people, at least in Cuba, and I'm saying what my experience. Oh, one thing is, like, before, I forgot to say something. Like, all these people who are intellectuals and artists, and all the mothers and the kids who were in 11 of July protests that are outside, all of them are doing incidents job. You know, some of them are going to the European community meetings to show them what happened in Cuba. Other people going to the United States to meet congressmen and senators. Other people going, I don't know, Costa Rica to meet the ex-president of Costa Rica, so they know what happened and they tell other people. So all of these people are not leaving and just forgetting. They're just been useful in that sense, no, making. But in terms of what you say about the disparity, no, of the group, or
to reflect inside the group with the disagreements and criticisms.
Yeah, I think we in Cuba we are learning a lot, because sometimes we have to say that the Cuban secret police is always infiltrating groups, and many times those disagreements are kind of fake, because they are kind of, the secret police say, no, Olga did this and talked about you to her, and then she talked to her. And they create all these situations that are human. Of course, human feelings, and they also have they have psychologists in there, and they have profiles of all of us, and they know the weakness, and sometimes they play with that, and sometimes these disagreements are actually manufactured. Sometimes they are not, because again, we are not the one group, everybody's the same, no? But I think what it was important for us is to make everybody understand that we are not perfect, because also there is this aspiration with activism that, oh, there's a perfect.
Everybody needs to be a hero.
Yeah, and we are not, we are non-heroes, basically. So this is very important, and also sometimes we make jokes about a lot of things. Like people realize, okay, this photo is putting in the internet, or this it happened to us, like this private chat conversation in a group of activists was put in national TV with our numbers, telephone numbers and names next to it. All of this. And people react differently. Some people say it's a joke, other people get mad. There are people who want one kind of society, other people who want different. So we are very different, but this is precisely what we love. That we are learning tolerance, we are learning in the process. It has been very hard. It's not easy because you are educated as, follow the leader, and we are learning, and we are actually, I think in Cuba, it already exists another Cuba. And it's the one that is live inside those movements, because people behave very differently. And we are humans, so.
Can we call it a double consciousness, sort of? Yeah?
Yeah, that's a nicer way to say.
With the group critic, now we are, okay, do you like to close?
now is the clapping.
Now is the clapping time. Thank you for all your insights. Thanks a lot.